Summer always reminds me of the beach, and when I think of the beach, I cannot help but remember something that happened to my friend James. It happened back when James was still in college. That day, it was just James and his two friends, Tyler and Daniel, three guys headed out to the coast. They didn't have a specific destination. They were just driving along the shoreline, planning to stop and hang out whenever they found a nice and empty spot. Just a casual outing, really. Hey, this spot looks good, doesn't it? Nah, it's packed. Let's find somewhere quieter. While joking around like that, they eventually came across a quiet beach with a mix of sand and rocks, not far from the main beach, but definitely off the beaten path. Besides a few windsurfers out in the distance, it was practically deserted. James and the others, though, they liked the hidden away feel of it and decided to stop and hang out there. But before getting into the water, they inflated the floats and inner tubes that they brought with them. Honestly, James wasn't a great swimmer, so the float was kind of a lifeline for him, really. Tyler and Daniel, they weren't much better, but they could definitely swim. But still, they had a great time together. No crowds, perfect weather, couldn't have asked for a better day to hit the beach, really. They played with a beach ball, floated around in the shallows, and time just flew by. Then Tyler suddenly said that he needed to use the bathroom. If it's just to pee, then just go over there, man. Nah, dude, I gotta take a dump. I saw a restroom over at the beach earlier. It's a bit of a walk, but I'll just head over there, okay? I'll be back in a bit. After Tyler left, James decided to take a break too. He lay down on his float right by the shoreline. About 10 minutes passed, and he was starting to doze off a bit when he heard someone calling out from the ocean. "Hey," they said. He looked around and saw someone waving from farther out in the water. It looked like Daniel. "Hey, what's up? What's going on?" "Hey," is all he said back. James shouted back, but whoever it was didn't seem to hear him, just kept waving. With no other choice, he started paddling his float out toward the figure. "Hey, dude, what the heck are you doing out there? You can't even swim that well." James kept yelling as he approached, but the figure only repeated the one word, "hey," over and over again. Something didn't feel right, and that was when James noticed something. Wait, who is that? He'd assumed it was Daniel because of the similar build, but looking closer, it wasn't him at all, and the guy wasn't even wearing a float. There's no way that Daniel, who was an even worse swimmer than James, could have gotten that far without one. And upon realizing that, the man stopped calling all of a sudden, and just sort of stared at James with a blank expression. James froze. Then, panicking, he turned his float around and tried to head back to shore. But the current, it was way too strong. No matter how hard he kicked, he just couldn't get any closer. Then, suddenly, something grabbed his right ankle. A tremendous force started dragging him underwater. He struggled desperately, but he couldn't hold onto the float. He genuinely thought in that moment, too, that he was about to die. He began screaming, "Help me," as salt water rushed into his mouth. This is it, he thought. But at the very last second, someone pulled him up. It was a surfer nearby. If that guy had arrived even a few seconds later, James, he might not have made it. But, barely able to breathe, James clung to the surfboard as they made it back to the shore. Tyler and Daniel, they came running over, clearly shocked. "Dude, are you okay?" "Hey, sorry man, my friend must have scared you, but thanks for saving him." "Yeah, no worries. I'm glad I noticed in time, but what happened?" James then said, "We shouldn't swim here anymore, guys. When I was being pulled up onto the board, I could have swore that I saw something. There was a man clinging to my leg from underwater, but it wasn't a person. The skin was like bluish purple and the face was like bloated and waterlogged almost, like a corpse maybe. The surfer then said, "Yeah man, I swear that I saw something too. In fact, I nearly let go of you. I was so freaked out, but thankfully I didn't, I guess." James suddenly felt a sharp pain in his right ankle, and when he looked down, there was a distinct bruise in the shape of a human hand. Well, needless to say, they didn't swim anymore that day. They packed up and left the beach in a panic, in fact. Later, they found out that the beach was off limits, known for its deadly rip currents and all that. Locals, they apparently never swam there. These ghosts had allegedly died in drowning accidents and were desperate to drag down anyone that they could into their other world, so they wouldn't be alone. After this too, I started to think that the sea was swarming with vengeful spirits of those who had drowned, restlessly searching for their next victim. Even now, whenever James hears someone calling out, "Hey," the fear from that day, you can still see sometimes the fear from that day in his eyes come back to him vividly. I've never had any kind of paranormal experience, but generally I've always believed. But the other week I was sat on a friend's sofa facing his living room door whilst he had his back to it, when out of nowhere I saw a long pair of greyish fingers creep around the door, and a woman that I can only describe as the woman from Shutter Island. Literally, you can Google Shutter Island woman and it'll show you exactly what I saw pretty much. Poked her head around briefly, scanned the room, locked eyes with me, and suddenly turned and disappeared from my line of sight. But the weirdest thing is that another friend walked through that door almost instantly after she disappeared, and swears up and down that there was no one there. I was so sure that someone was in the house that we looked in every room twice. Now, I've tripped before years ago, so I know what that feels like, and even then you don't see entities with the vivid clarity that I saw her with. But the strangest thing is that two of my friends have seen an entity poke its head around doors in different locations here, and I spoke to them both separately while holding back most of the story, and both of them filled in the gaps perfectly, ensuring me that they were telling the truth. So my question for all of you is, do I have to be worried about this? And how should I deal with her if she decides to return or something? Between busy schedules and summer plans, sometimes all I've got is a couple of minutes. But Factor helps me eat smarter with tasty, chef-prepped meals that are dietitian approved and delivered right to my door. And now, with more than 65 weekly meals made for how I live and what I like to eat, I've got even more ways to fit in a real meal wherever the day takes me. Choose from a wider selection of weekly meal options, including premium seafood choices like salmon and shrimp at no extra cost. Enjoy even more GLP-1 friendly meals and new Mediterranean diet options packed with protein and good-for-you fats. For the first time, try Asian-inspired meals with bold flavors influenced by China, Thailand, and more. From more choices to better nutrition. That's why 97% of customers say that Factor helped them live a healthier life. Feel the difference, no matter your routine. Me personally, I decided to try their protein range as I'm back at the gym this year, and not only has it really fit in with my schedule and made staying on track with my diet so much easier, but their chicken Florentine was absolutely amazing. That creamy garlic and cauliflower was incredible. Honestly, I've used Factor meals now for a little bit, and if you're busy like me and looking for easy, delicious meals that keep you on track, then you should genuinely give them a try. So, eat smart at factormeals.com/scared50off and use scared50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. That's scared50off at factormeals.com for 50% off plus free shipping. Get delicious, ready-to-eat meals delivered with Factor. When I was around 6 or 7 years old, I had what most people would probably call an imaginary friend. But looking back, it didn't feel like that at all. She wasn't someone that I played with. I didn't feed her pretend meals or make her part of games. She didn't have a name. I just called her girl. I don't remember what she looked like exactly. I think she was just white, maybe, like a white figure, not really detailed. What I do remember clearly, though, is the feeling of her presence. She was always there, really. Sometimes I felt like she was talking to me, but not in a way that I could recall specific words or messages. It was more like a quiet awareness that someone was near me. But it wasn't scary, not at all in fact. I never felt afraid of her. I stopped seeing her at around the age of 10, I think. I don't remember a moment when she left. She just wasn't there anymore. And interestingly enough, I never missed her either. I didn't feel sad or confused. It was like she had quietly come and she had quietly gone. I only recently told a friend about this, and she suggested that it could have been a ghost or maybe a spirit, which honestly kind of shook me a bit. I never really thought about it that way, but it's weird now to realize that she didn't feel like someone that I created in my head. I just accepted her being there, like she belonged. The strangest part to me is that she had no name though, no made-up personality, nothing. I've also always been the kind of person animals are drawn to. People have even told me that I give off a witchy vibe or that I have strong energy, whatever that means. But has anyone else experienced anything like this? A presence in childhood that just didn't feel like gaming or a creation of imagination or something, but more like, I don't know, someone who is quietly with you. This is a story that I actually heard from a pastor one time. I first heard it from an old friend of mine who told me that it was something that a pastor had once shared with him. I've tried to recall it exactly the way that he told me, and so I'll share it from his point of view. So, the pastor began. It was about 30 years ago, back when photos were still taken on film. The pastor who had told me this story once received a request to offer prayers for a photo. The requester was a man in his 30s who looked obviously healthy. He said that he enjoyed mountain climbing. The pastor believed it was important to honor and memorialize one's ancestors, but internally he didn't believe in things like ghosts and spirits or stuff like that. However, as a pastor, he occasionally received requests to perform a blessing or spiritual cleansing for cursed or ghostly things. Most of the ghost photos that he had seen were simply cases of different phenomenon, where landscapes appeared to resemble human figures or misunderstandings of reflection in glass, stuff like that. The phenomenon refers to the brain's tendency to interpret shapes composed of 3 points as human faces, suggesting that humans are programmed to perceive such patterns as faces. Therefore, he explained this to the requester and emphasized the importance of mindset and attitude. Assuming that the photo from the man would be similar, he then looked at the photo that he was given. In the photo, the requester stood in the middle, surrounded by 4 to 5 people who appeared to be his mountain climbing companions. It was a typical group photo, really. Now, before offering the prayer, may I ask what exactly about this photo concerns you? The pastor asked. Based on his past experiences, he assumed it was likely that somewhere in this scenery someone appeared as a figure, so he asked for clarification. The requester asked him, "Don't you just feel something from this photo, though?" I don't know. I did feel a slight sense of discomfort when I first saw it, I suppose." But the pastor honestly replied, as he had indeed felt a slight discomfort when he looked at the group photo. "Well, this is a commemorative photo taken with your mountain climbing companions, right?" When the pastor said this, the requester replied in a heavy voice, "Yeah, it does look that way, doesn't it?" The remark caught the pastor's attention, so he looked over the photo again. Centered around the requester were his mountain climbing companions, all of whom were smiling or almost smiling, I suppose, for the commemorative photo. However, upon reviewing it, he felt even more discomfort. Isn't it just a photo taken together for a sort of commemorative occasion or something? When the pastor asked this, the requester said, "Look, I took this photo by myself using the camera's self-timer. I swear to you that I was the only one there." "No, really? That can't be true," the pastor said as he looked at the photo again, finally realizing the source of the discomfort that he had initially felt. You see, while the requester was smiling, the other people looked sort of somber almost, and their skin was way more pale compared to the requester. Above all though, although the photo was taken on a sunny day, only the requester seemed to have a shadow, while all the other people in the picture, they didn't seem to have one. He shared this story with me, and finally, the pastor is said to have concluded with this. Many people are quick to label something that looks even a little off face as a ghost for a photo for fun. 90% of photos labeled as ghost photos are simply tricks of light or reflections and are not truly spiritual. However, it is also a fact that 1% of those may actually be genuine ghost photos. The pastor, he felt something was off about this one. But if a ghost photo can blend in so naturally that even he couldn't spot it right away, well, that's pretty terrifying to think about. I obviously never saw the photo myself, but ever since I heard this story, I cannot help but wonder if something like that might be lurking in my own pictures. A passerby in the background, a woman sitting at the next table. Maybe they're so clearly visible that I never even think to question them. I guess you can go ahead and open your albums and start exploring. Because, who knows, maybe there's something in your photos that you just haven't noticed yet. Perhaps something that you wish that you never saw. So I lived in China from 2011 to 2016, and this happened in mid-2012. My friend and I decided to visit the coastal city of Guangdao for a weekend. It was only a 3-hour train ride away, and my friend, who was uber rich but also a mess, was personal friends with the owner of the observatory turned hostel that we liked to stay at when we visited as groups, but this time it was just the two of us. So after a lovely day, we decided that we wanted to hit the bars, but we wanted to stay away from downtown. We get in a taxi. I can speak pretty good Chinese, my friend cannot, and I tell him that we want to go to the closest bar. Don't care if it's not popular, just take us wherever you want to go. As a side note, on the way to who knows where, our driver spotted this awesome fruit market, and he paused the meter while we all bought some fruit. Anyway, he takes us to said random bar, and it's definitely a club that wants to be a club but isn't quite clubbing, which was perfect for us, totally here for it. So we go in, and about a quarter of the tables, lots of tables in Chinese clubs, instead of opening dancing space, you just sort of dance in between the tables really, are full and the bar is completely open. We take a seat at the bar and order a round of beer, and my friend pulls out a pack of pills. She was a bit of an addict and was taking literally 12 Lunesta a day, and would take 6 at a time and then start drinking. You could get the generic brand OTC still in China back then, but part of the reason that she asked me to go with her is because I always refused to just leave her whenever she got to the state that she couldn't function. And well, she was padding for the whole trip, and I was both eager to please and eager to party, really. And well, I was a dumb 20-year-old and decided that I, too, wanted to know what it was like to get high on Lunesta, and so I asked for a pill. She refused at first, saying that I couldn't handle it, but I kept pestering and she gave me one. Down the hatch it went. Suddenly, cut from black, the club is now booming, and there's this big guy in my face talking to me like we're in the middle of a conversation, and the bartender slides us over 2 shot glasses, and a guy gestures to cheers, so I cheers and drink. Tequila, and fade to black again. Cut from the black, and now there's nobody in the club except for me and this big guy, the staff, and a couple of other stragglers. I'm pretty lucid now. The big guy says that he doesn't know where my friend is, but he knows how to get me back to the observatory, and says that he can give me a ride if I'd like. I accept and get in the front of his van, and we're driving and driving and driving, way longer than what our taxi driver took. So I said as much, and he just casually says, "Oh no, we're going back to my place. I've got some friends there that you really want to meet." My brain suddenly went, "Oh no," and I immediately started trying to quietly find a way to escape. I noted that the door was unlocked, which was good, but we were driving way too fast for me to jump out at this stage, and it's not like people would see something bad happen and step in to help. That just doesn't happen there in China. So I'm taking stock of everything that I have on me, and it all comes together. I fill my cigarettes. I see a 24-hour convenience store at the upcoming intersection. The light is yellow. The light turned red. And as soon as we were slowed enough, I screamed, "I have to buy some cigarettes," and flung the door open and ran to this little Unimart. I begged the cashier to please call the police because there's a bad guy after me and to please help, but they refuse and started yelling at me to get out of the store. Then the big guy walks in, sees me, and starts speed walking toward me. I scream for them to call the police again, and they're just yelling to get out over and over. So now I'm running through the store while this big guy is chasing me, and I'm knocking over displays in between us and everything, and suddenly the police come in. I sprint over to them and get behind them and point to a big guy and say, "He's trying to take me." The police were confused as heck at first, but big guy had no explanation, so they put us in separate police cars and took us both to the station. They sat me in the detective's cubicle while they took big guy into a room in the back. The detective asked me my side of the story, who I was, why I was in the place that I was, why I was in China even. They needed to see my passport, etc. I asked if I could go outside and have a cigarette, and he said no. He left, and I waited and waited for quite some time. My phone is dead, my cash is gone. I still had my SLR camera though. A couple of hours go by, and eventually the detective comes out and tells me that I can go. I asked him what about the big guy, and he said that the big guy gave them a fake ID and that they found out that he is actually from Hong Kong. He refuses to say why he's in Qingdao when he's supposed to be in another city, refuses to say where he's currently staying, so they're holding him for questioning apparently. I told the police that my phone was dead and I didn't have any money for a taxi, but they told me, "Oh well," and eventually I was able to find another taxi driver that sympathized with my story and traded me a ride to the hostel for a cigarette. Eventually I get to our room and it's locked, but I didn't have a key. My friend had the only one, and it took literally 10 minutes of banging on the door for my friend to finally wake up, unlock the door, and then go back to bed. Honestly, I was glad that she was safe, but I felt completely neglected in that moment. So I'm not someone who usually believes in paranormal stuff. I live in an 11-story apartment building, and until recently I've never experienced anything I'd consider abnormal. I've always felt comfortable in my home. But this past week, a few weird things have happened, and I cannot stop thinking about them. The first thing happened one morning. Because it's hot, I usually sleep with my windows open, and as I woke up, I reached to close the window, and I glanced at the building across from mine, and I can see the rooftop of that building very clearly from my room, and that was when I saw someone standing up there. But it didn't look like a normal person. Even though it was bright, a sunny morning, this figure looked completely black, like a shadow. No visible features, no clothes, no face, nothing. It stood still for a moment, then slowly walked away toward the inside of the building and disappeared from view. Honestly, I was stunned. I thought maybe I was still half asleep, but I was definitely awake. Ever since then, too, I've been carrying my phone around more, hoping that I would see it again and catch a photo. So far, no luck though. The second thing happened later that same day though. I was walking through the hallway and about to knock on my sibling's door to say something, and as I stood there, I heard clear footsteps behind me, like someone had just walked past. For a second I thought, maybe Mum's home early, but then I remembered my mum was working a night shift that night and wasn't supposed to be home until late. My sibling hadn't left their room either, and so I stayed in my room for the rest of the day because, I'm not gonna lie, I was genuinely freaked out by that. At night, I told my dad and he brushed it off and said that I was probably tired or imagining things. But then, the third thing happened. At around 11:15 p.m., I was in my room and my computer was completely shut down. Suddenly, though, the screen turned on by itself. The desktop appeared showing the time at 11:15 p.m. No updates, no mouse movement, no explanation. The screen stayed on for a bit and then just turned off again. And honestly, I don't know how to explain that. There's obviously no threat here, and I still feel mostly safe, but it's like something is just off all of a sudden. Whenever I go to close the window now, I cannot help but check that rooftop again every time. And something feels weird. Has anyone experienced something similar to this? Like seeing something where they shouldn't be, or strange sounds and electronics acting up without any cause? If you have any thoughts or experiences or know what this is, then I would really love to hear them and appreciate you sharing. Thanks. I was around 9 or 10 years old, and back then, life was just play, eat, and sleep really. The good life. Well, we lived in this tiny 300 square foot house. My dad and grandmother had been living there since the 1960s. It was really small too. When you enter though, there's a hall or a kitchen on the right, a washroom on the left. Past the kitchen is this tiny bedroom, like 6.5 feet wide at most. And before my dad was born, my grandmother had a son who unfortunately died after birth. The year was 1964. Then she had 3 daughters and finally one boy, my dad, in 1970. Anyway, my grandfather died when my dad was just 2, 1972. Later, one of my dad's sisters passed away too in 1980. Everyone says that I look exactly like her too. But they were poor, like really poor, so they rented out the only bedroom to a couple with a kid. Everyone else slept in the hall, and one day the man who rented the room died by, well, self-deletion. Our building was made of cement and iron rods, and the fan hung from one of those rods, if you catch my drift. Well, eventually my mum married my dad in 1995. It was just the 3 of them, Mum, Dad, and Grandma. The remaining 2 sisters got married. They started sleeping in the bedroom, but my mum kept saying that she felt like someone was choking her at night. She got sleep paralysis, and so they moved to the hall and my grandma took the bedroom. In 1997, my older brother was born, and unfortunately again, he died right after birth. I was born in 1999. Cut to 2007 or 2008, I've always been scared of the dark, and especially that room. I avoided it as much as I could really, not ever really knowing why, but I just did. And one day, I was trying to turn on the kitchen light, but I was too short to reach the switch, and I felt something sort of pull me in. I was holding something, maybe a teddy bear. I don't remember exactly, but I do remember what I saw. I saw a man hanging from the fan, dressed in all white, clear as day. Well, I screamed and ran to my dad watching TV in the hall room. He got up, turned on the kitchen light, went to go and check, and there was nothing. I was just a kid. I didn't know anything about the man who had died in there. Not until I was at least 15 or 16 when my family finally told me. And that man that I saw, well, as far as I can tell, he was real. And he died in our home. In 2018, my dad got really sick, kidney disease, and he passed away. I became the only one earning in the family, and the first thing that I did was I moved. In 2022, my grandmother passed away, and in 2023 I moved to New York, and genuinely thought that I had left it all behind finally. But last month I had a dream, and it felt too real. I saw the little baby who died before me. I saw my old house, haunted and filled with spirits. I was screaming, shouting, and no idea why, but I couldn't move, and that's when I realized that I had sleep paralysis. And then my dad appeared. He stood beside me like he was protecting me, and I woke up chanting God's name, and I don't know what any of that means, but maybe I never really left that house, and maybe I carry a part of it with me. I really don't know, but if you have any idea as to how I can get beyond all of this and get rid of it, then please do let me know. I met my husband around Thanksgiving of 2011. We started dating on December 13th that same year, and I moved in with him, my bestie, and her husband in January of 2012. He has known since we had met that I am able to see ghosts, though we rarely mention it in the beginning of our relationship. That is, until the night of the incident. Now, to understand what happened, you have to understand the layout of the apartment that the four of us shared at the time. It was a second-story apartment. Straight across from the front door was a door into a nice little patio with a storage area that we rarely used. The storage area, not the patio. But to your left would be the living room, and on the right, a galley-style kitchen that was partitioned off by a small dividing wall, and a small dining area that we again rarely used. Off of the kitchen was a utility or laundry room and a pantry room as well. There were 2 closets in the hallway. One was small and would likely be considered a coat closet, while the other was slightly larger and we used it for extra linens. Behind the utility room was the first bathroom, and across from that was the first bedroom. Immediately after that was the master bedroom, with its pivot bath and a lovely walk-in closet. My husband, Maddie, and I, we shared the first bedroom while my bestie and her husband had the master. Honestly, it was a wonderful place. Now, Matt worked most nights, so when I was heading to bed at 9, he was leaving for work usually. Now, Matt worked nights, so when I was heading to bed at 9, he was usually leaving for work, and when I was getting up at 6, he would be getting home. And on this particular night, I was still asleep when he got home, so he started coffee for the house when he felt like someone was coming down the hallway. "Morning, babe," he said, but apparently I didn't respond. Thinking that I was pulling a prank on him, he walked around the sink or the breakfast bar to look down the hallway, but there was nobody there. So he went back to his task, putting the thought out of his mind. A few moments later, he felt arms wrap around his waist. To be clear, I do that to him still, and am about 4 inches shorter than him, so again he thought that it was me. "Well, good morning," he said, reaching down to place one of his hands on my arm. Only there were no arms to touch. He spun around to find me groggily coming into the kitchen. "That was funny," he said, exasperated. I, still half asleep, asked, "What was funny?" "You and your silly prank," he huffed. That woke me up faster than a cup of coffee ever could. What prank? The one where you come up behind me, but when I go to grab you, you're not there? Well, that would be rude. That's not something that I would do. I argued back. That was when I saw her. It wasn't my first time seeing her, but it was the first time that she had done something like this. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath to calm myself down so that I wouldn't freak him out too badly. "Babe, I just got out of bed," I said, "like 2 seconds ago. I smelled the coffee and knew that you had come home. I came out here to tell you good morning and to get some coffee, and what you just experienced was not me." I took another deep breath and turned to the spirit that was hiding behind him now. "And that was a very nasty thing to do," I hissed. Matt looked at me like I had lost my mind, but I ignored him. I was too interested in the girl who stood next to him, looking like she had just gotten caught with her hand in the cookie jar. She was about 8 or maybe 10 years old, and she wears an old sort of timey dress. I want to say Victorian in style, but maybe not. I've tried to get a straight answer about her name, and all I know is that it's Annabelle or Annabeth or something along those lines. Now, I know you're thinking Annabelle. I thought the same thing. However, I've concluded that it is not the same Annabelle. For one, this Anna doesn't seem to want to cause anybody any physical harm. For another, due to recent events with said Annabelle doll, I highly doubt that they are one and the same. The thing is that I don't know where this Anna came from. All myself and others have been able to piece together is that she became attached to Matty when he was on the truck with his aunt and uncle when he was younger. They did travel through the deep south, so I'm guessing that that's where she must have attached herself to him. Why? I have no idea. What I do know is that since this incident, she hasn't tried to harm anyone, scare anyone, or cause much mischief at all. She, like others, will still move things from time to time and still touch Maddie at times when there's nobody else around. Otherwise, she doesn't do much but follow Matt around. Whoever this Anna is, I think that all she wants is to be loved again and to have some family, perhaps. So as far as Maddie and I are concerned, as long as she doesn't try to harm anyone or anything, then she is more than welcome to stay with us until she is ready to move on. This was a few summers ago now. My father and I were celebrating me finishing university with a fishing trip to Logan Lake. Not the actual lake, but just the municipality. I don't think the lake even had a name, to be honest, but it was one of the surrounding lakes close by that was less popular, not being family accessible, and more of a private lake in the sense that people couldn't get there without some clearance at least. We were the only ones at the lake the whole time, in fact. And well, we get there. The first day is normal, probably the best fishing that we've both ever had in our entire lives, starting at around 4 p.m. We were trolling the shallows, clear water, 4 to 6 feet deep, with a pumpkinhead fly and getting a fish every 5 minutes. Generally, this never really happens, especially in an area like this because the fish can actually see you pretty easily. I think we both landed at least 25 fish each by the end of the day. Super glad that we brought the 2 extra rods on this trip. The fish were pretty small, 12 to 16 inches and slim, but they were feisty, and the ones that we did keep tasted amazing. The second day was more typical fishing for the lake, about 4 fish each over the course of the day. We eat 2 fish each time, the limit for the lake. We eat some hot dogs, then eventually we go to sleep. Now, at around 2 a.m., I wake up feeling very alert for some reason. At this point, I'm a bit irritable because I know that I won't be able to fall back asleep for a while, or at all, given how I feel. A few seconds later, I feel this primal fear, like I couldn't move even if I wanted to. There's this slow, childlike sort of babbling along the side of the tent all of a sudden. every instinct in my body is telling me not to speak or even make a sound that might make my presence known. In a way, it sort of sounded like it was trying to communicate something. Not in the sense of telling me to leave, but more like trying to get a point across, or like being very insistent almost. Almost like a baby becoming frustrated that its cries out of hunger weren't being heeded, or like a cat asking to be fed without meowing, but whatever it was, it sounded unsettling. Let me be clear too and say that it didn't actually sound like a baby. It's more like it just sounded wrong, almost like it wasn't from this world. It didn't sound like any language that I knew or was familiar with, more like gibberish, but despite the fact that it sounded like gibberish, it felt like the words had meaning to the being. Something about the speech patterns, or maybe whatever it was saying, just petrified me though. The closest comparison that I can think of are the dead children from the TV series From. It hadn't come out yet, but I remember when I first started watching it, the ghoul children reminded me of the babbling that I heard that summer. Despite being so scared and feeling so alert, I remember completely passing out after the voice stopped, like it just sort of put me to sleep or something. My dad didn't wake up or hear anything. He was wearing earplugs that night. We stayed another night after that against better judgment, and thankfully nothing weird happened. Fishing was average the rest of the time, and we left without any further incident. The only other notable thing that really happened was that every fish that we released on the final day was scooped up by 2 loons. We didn't ever go back there, partly because of my eerie experience, but also partly because I didn't want to taint the memory of back-to-back fish and what was an amazing fishing experience. I live in Eastern Europe, and we're known here for rafts by the river as a bit of a party place. There's a certain part of the river where you can rent a raft for 20 to 30 people, small celebrations, and by chance I live in the proximity of that part of this river. Now, we were celebrating a friend's announcement for a kid, and everyone was drunk. Well, everyone except for me, and this one girl who was on meds that does not mix with alcohol. So, with booze and snacks depleting, that girl and me decided to drive some 7 kilometers to the nearest shop, 5 miles for you guys in the States, to replenish the party with goods. We make our purchases and we head back, and she's telling me some sort of a silly story when I notice a shadowy form with glowing eyes, but only slightly, jump across the road in front of us. She goes on with the story, and I tell her, "Yo, did you just see that?" And she replied, "Yeah, I did." And I'm going to act like nothing happened and continue with my story because that was terrifying. Honestly, I was shocked by that. It wasn't some glitch or some false vision type of an event. It was super clear, a shadowy form moving at insane speeds, jumping over the road and onto the river. Now, some time had passed and I almost forgot about that shadow. My mum that lives in the house next to mine had a hip surgery at one stage, and the doctor advised that she should do some daily walks to get moving. It was late, maybe about 11 p.m, and she hadn't performed her daily walk yet, so she asked me and Pawsey, our dog, if we wanted to go with her for a quick walk. We went into the fields, arable lands. There's a path in between crop fields, and it's dark there, but the moonlight was really bright that night, so we could still see pretty clearly. As we're walking on a certain field, there's a sort of peach tree all alone in the field here, and as we're walking, it appeared, zoomed from a faraway bush just behind that tree. It wasn't walking, mind you, and whatever this thing is, it doesn't have, like, normal movement, as if someone or something is biological. Honestly, it sort of seems more like a mouse pointer sort of dragged it across the screen. My mother, she clearly saw it too, the dog too as well, because the dog was confused. He also stopped in place, and Mum then said, "Alright, let's go back, and we're never going walking at midnight ever again." I wanted to see it again though, and this time to be 1000% sure that it wasn't my imagination or anything like it. I wanted to know if it was real, and I wanted to get close to it. So I went alone this time, with Pawsey of course. He won't let me go alone even if I wanted to be honest, and went towards that same tree. On those fields there's much less light pollution than in your average city, I guess. And it's slightly elevated above sea level, so stars and skies are super visible there, and everything is pretty clear. I made my way there in total silence. Pawsey laid down at one stage, and we waited for some 15 minutes. As soon as my mind started to get bored of, well, nothing happening, that was when it appeared again, zigzagged 3 times between trees, bushes, and some faraway fence. And this time I was sure that it was human height. It moved without legs, like floating almost. It was shadowy, and when there's only a little bit of light, it appears more brown than black in color. It has something that resembles eyes, slightly visible where the head is supposed to be. It doesn't seem malevolent or dangerous. It could have easily killed me there. I mean, I was alone with a dog with no one around for like at least 3 kilometers. It seems to live in that area, or at least that makes sense due to the fact that I've seen it 3 times there now. And really, that's all I could draw from the experience. What do you guys think that I should do, though? I am of a sort of scientific mind, I guess. I don't like inexplicable things, and this is more mysterious, I guess, than I would normally like it to be. Obviously, this is my own personal experience, but there are some forces that we obviously do not know of or acknowledge them as they are, even ones that science have discovered over time that we didn't once knew existed. And who knows, maybe this is just another one of those things. But I'm wondering if anyone else here has seen this sort of shadow dude thing. If you have, I would love to hear from you, and if you know what it is, then please do let me know. A few weekends ago, my friends and I set out for a camping trip in Lake Gagonza State Park, located in Staunton, WA. While finishing up some geocaching on a hiking trail near the outhouses, we encountered something, or I guess someone, strange. So, you can enter the trail after crossing the path of another trail that enters the forest. The trail that we were on circled a prairie that laid in the middle of the trail and was surrounded by forest. The sun was low in the sky. It had to have been roughly 6 p.m. The sun was just above the tree line as we started our hike. As we were at our last geocache of the night, the sun had just gone behind the tree line, and it was beginning to get dark, but we could still see without the assistance of flashlights. The forest, it went silent. No more sounds of bugs around us or birds that have been active all day. And, whatever it was, it approached us with a whistle, a bone-chilling whistle. Our entire group went silent and nobody said a word, until we heard a second whistle. This second whistle was more broken up than the first, I guess, and in the slightly tipsy state that I was in, I thought that it had been a human whistle as it was not perfect. To that I responded with a pretty stern hello, hoping for an explanation as to why our group got whistled at twice. I thought you were dogs, a voice said as it rounded the trail towards us. As he passed our group, I noticed that I could not make out a face out on his person, but chalked it up to nerves and being distracted. As a group, we agreed that while it was a strange encounter, we shouldn't really panic, but took it as a sign to get off the trail at this stage. But this is where things get even more weird. You see, all 4 of us in the group kept our eyes peeled for anything as we made our way back to the car, when suddenly this creature, calling it a creature as it surely wasn't human, suddenly appeared on the edge of the trail closest to the woods. Staring blankly to the field in front of it, that would have been to our right, and in the flattest, driest tone it said, "Who's that guy?" Everyone in our group kept walking as I answered, "The same guy from earlier," as I assumed it was talking about my boyfriend who was behind the group. We had never been so silent on the walk back to the car though. Checking behind our shoulders and our surroundings constantly, we made it back to our campsite where we decided, due to the time of the day, that it would be best to wait to pack up until morning. While we were debriefing our experience, I told my friends how, in neither encounter, I just couldn't make out any faces. Being a female hiker, I make a point to gather some facial features of anyone that I cross on the trail, just as a bit of a just in case. But no one in our group could identify a face, and in our own ways we described how the face on this thing was not a human face. It seemed to almost have a blurred effect over what should have been a human face. All of us had seen the same thing, like you could tell where the eyes, nose and mouth should have been, but there was just none on this person or creature or whatever. Being that it whistled and was not identifiable, we are convinced that we may have encountered a skinwalker, but the weird thing is that they're just not that relevant in that area of Wisconsin. It was a long night at the campsite with the impending feeling of being watched. I'm spiritually inclined and I took the necessary steps of protecting our campsite for a secured night's sleep, but I have had a strange encounter since then. I'm willing to explain those encounters at some point, but for now, I'd really like to get your thoughts on this. What did we see, and are skinwalkers known for having blurred faces like this? If you can help me out, then I would appreciate it. This is the second and the last of what I consider to be a paranormal encounter that I've experienced. This happened about 6 years ago, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it. So I was sleeping soundly when suddenly I felt a cold breath in my ear. It jolted me awake, but I didn't open my eyes out of fear of what I might have seen. I lay there motionless, pretending to be asleep. I could hear and feel every inhale and exhale. The breath was unnaturally cold, like the blast of air when you open a freezer, and it was right there brushing against my ear. For what felt like a few minutes, the icy breath lingered, then it stopped. I felt a weight settle on my side, pressing down as if something was sitting on me. It was a little difficult to breathe with the pressure on me, but I was way too terrified to move. I stayed frozen, praying that whatever it was would just leave me alone. After about 15 minutes, the weight lifted off of me and I heard the breathing again, but it was above me now, on the ceiling. It hung there heavy and slow, moving to the center of the room, then it drifted to the corner above the door. Still too afraid to open my eyes, I tried to wait it out. It had to end sometime, right? In my mind, I was trying to think of a logical explanation for what could be happening, but none of it made any sense. I'm a skeptic of the paranormal, but whatever this was, it definitely did not feel human. I lay there paralyzed, listening to the breathing for what felt like forever, but roughly half an hour went by and all I could do was focus on this heavy breathing coming from that corner of my room. I couldn't take it anymore though. I mean, I had to do something, because just lying there hoping that it would end felt more terrifying than confronting it. If I stayed still, it might never leave, and that thought was worse than the fear itself. I remembered the flashlight on my nightstand. I had to grab it. I had to shine the light on the corner, expose whatever was there. So I rehearsed the plan over and over in my head. How far was the flashlight? How would I grab it? How fast could I turn it on? I went through every detail like it was life or death, because it felt like it was. If I messed up or if I fumbled, I genuinely thought that I could die. It sounds illogical, I know, but this whole situation was illogical, and I mean, when you go through something like this, it's hard to think clearly. Finally though, I decided that it was time. So in one swift motion, I grabbed the flashlight off the nightstand, turned it on, and as I lifted it up, this must have taken less than half a second. If this was an Olympic sport, I would have won gold in that moment. That's how quickly I got to it. But as I shined the light into the corner of the room, I saw, well, nothing. There was nothing there, and the breathing had seemingly stopped. I sat there, trying to compose myself, trying to calm my racing heart as I shine the light around the room, searching for whatever had been tormenting me for the last hour at this stage. But there was no one, there was nothing, and I was alone. I got up and turned on the light, and then I sat there waiting for daylight to come, too scared to sleep now in case it came back. I don't have a logical explanation for what happened that night. How could I? How could I explain a chilling breath directly in my ear that I not only heard but felt? Crazy dream? No, this woke me up. I was having a wonderful sleep before this. So how do I explain the weight of something sitting on top of me? I don't own any pets. I'm someone who likes to analyze things and think them through logically, but this is one thing that just doesn't have a logical explanation. I have since moved from that house, and thankfully I haven't experienced anything like that since then. I, a 20-year-old female, have been with my boyfriend, 22 and male, for over 5 years now. Throughout our relationship, he told me that he keeps experiencing sleep paralysis, and that it became more and more frequent. He had maybe 1 or 2 the first 3 years, but last year they just kept getting worse. We are both students, and for the past 3 years he's been living in a rented apartment with a good friend of ours. Sometimes I spend the night there as well. And one time, last year, he told me that he experienced sleep paralysis again, and his experience went like this. He was aware and awake but wasn't able to move or say anything, like his lips were glued together almost. He said that he tried to scream my name to wake me up so that I could help him, but just nothing ever came out of his mouth. He also mentioned that he kept seeing in front of one of the corners of the room a big black shadow that made him feel really nauseous. Thankfully, he eventually got out of it and he went back to bed. Now, the next day I was still there and he asked me to stay with him that night as well, in case something happened again, because he's starting to get a bit scared of it. I tried to stay awake in case something did happen, but I think I immediately fell asleep, to be honest. And this is how I was woken up in the middle of the night. So, I heard some sounds and immediately opened my eyes. And there was my boyfriend, laying on his side with his back to me, resting his head on one hand, and saying random stuff in a language that I have never ever heard before, looking at the exact same corner that he mentioned about when he had the sleep paralysis. The weirdest thing though is that it seemed like he was having an actual conversation. He would talk and then stop as if somebody was answering, and then he would talk again and so on and so forth. I was like, what the heck is he doing? And called his name. He immediately stopped talking, and then the heaviest silence filled the room for what seemed like forever. Then he started hysterically laughing, the scariest laugh that I'd ever heard. Quite honestly, it didn't even seem to be his laugh. Next thing I know, he literally falls back asleep and starts snoring. I froze, not knowing what to do and also not wanting to wake him up again. I just stayed there waiting for the dawn while tearing up a bit. The next day, I told him about what had happened and he didn't remember any of it. He felt really sorry for what he put me through, although it wasn't his fault obviously. We told his friend what had happened as well, and that made him share this experience from the same night. So, apparently, he had the worst nightmare where he felt like he was literally glued to the bed, forced to stare in the eyes of a dark figure in the corner